not. All right. So, hi, everyone. I'm with Lisa again, and we are looking at my most recent lesson. This was a grade 5 computer science lesson where we were looking at actually Morse code. And one of the standards which I thought really encouraged me to use this lesson in particular was the one about modeling how information is broken down, transmitted, and then reassembled at the destination. And even though it's an archaic thing, I think it's really cool that the students learn about some of the history of technology and where it came from and how everything developed to where we are today. Just as a personal reflection of this one, first you'll notice that it was Crazy Hair Day. So I was wearing a big blue wig. And if you are an elementary and early childhood teacher, you'll know that that's part of the fun that we have here. I actually thought that this lesson was not my best. I thought that the fourth one that I did, the most recent one that I did before this, was actually slightly better in hitting some of those standards. I think I did all right in this one though. And so, yeah, Lisa, what you came in a few minutes into the lesson. What kind of feedback can you give me? And I think really focusing on what you've seen kind of as a growth for the last little bit since I started this program.
Sure. So I'm interested, first of all, to understand why you didn't think it was your best. What were some things that you preferred that in your previous lesson, the lesson 4, as compared to here? What are some things that you were thinking about?
I think one thing that happened in lesson 4 is that there was a little bit more opportunity for differentiation, because with just the way the lesson was structured and the way that it ran, there was more time for me to kind of give that certain piece of work that had to be done that the students could start running with, and then I could check in more with the students who needed more support. And some of that did happen in this lesson, but not as much. Another thing that I really noticed the difference on is the shorter Friday lessons compared to the Monday to Thursday, and how much time was actually available for some of that. I think also with the assessment piece, you know, I had the paper that they were working on. I had the kind of that they were able to turn in at the end. One thing that I had planned that I didn't have time for was a Kahoot where we would look at, you know, some of the history of, you know, where did Morse code come from? How old is it? How is it used? I was happy though with the end of the lesson when we talked more about, well, gee, if this was part of today, you know, how would that change your communication with your friends? How would that change your communication with your family? And what do you think that would look like if that was how we had to communicate long distance today? And I think actually only a few of the students were actually able to wrap their head around that concept. Some of them, I think it was too big of a question for, but some of them actually did wrap their head, I think, pretty well around that concept. So just in terms of flow, yeah, I was happy with the lesson. I think it went all right. But I just feel like some of those standards where I'm looking at the difference between proficient and outstanding, I definitely was more on the proficient side with this one, as opposed to like, oh, that's clearly, you know, you've done a great job at that.
Sure.
That's just kind of my overall and somewhat more self-critical feeling of it. Yeah.
Sure. So if you think of your overall objective of the lesson, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we look at where students were in relation to that objective, right? Which is our overall indicator of success. Then was the purpose of your lesson to have them understand that Morse code was a form of technology that was used historically, or was it to have them successfully code using a Morse code platform? What was it like? What was the was it the understanding of how to do it using the spheros, or was it the understanding?
So if we go back to actually what the CSTA standard is, it's about taking information, breaking it down, transmitting it, and reassembling.
Okay.
And so to answer your question then more specifically, it would actually be about how they were able to, you know, encode something, transmit it, decode it. Were the spheros 100% necessary in that? Actually, no, I think that they were a really fun way to include it. It was a fun way to use the iPads and the spheros. But could it have been done just with banging two cups together to make the Morse code or a flashing light? Yes, it could have been done. So I
Sure.
think it was less about the spheros because the coding was not quite as complex as some other coding that we have done in the past. And it was more about the concept of being able to, decode and then
Or
and
Sure.
encode and decode at the other end. Yes,
So then if we think about, and the key understandings are encode and decode, right?
correct. Those
Did
are the two big
your
vocabularies.
assessment that you give you a clear understanding of their understanding of those two concepts?
It gave me, yes, I think that both the assessment, in class, asking students, both individually and in class, getting that feedback, as well as seeing how well they succeeded with actually doing it on the paper themselves and what they were able to turn in, was a good indicator of their ability to do those things. And I think that doing them and then completely understanding what they are related, but not the same thing. So that was why I think at the end with the summary or the plenary, hammering in those two vocabulary words again that we started with at the beginning about the encoding process, and then about at the end, the decoding process, and having each student take a turn at each of those two processes, I think did solidify that at the end for me. Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
So maybe it was just the time constraints that made it feel a little bit more rushed in terms of maybe your critique of it.
Possibly.
Right?
And I think also the fact that they had ice cream 30 minutes before that because
So
of the
maybe they
special
were a
day,
little off task.
was the beginning of the lesson was a bit crazy. And then
Yeah.
about 20 minutes in, you could see some students were kind of
Yeah.
slumping a little bit. And so, but that's,
Yeah, I don't know though. I think you did a good job.
I think,
considering all factors, the crazy
Yeah.
hair day and then plus the ice cream beforehand, right?
Right,
Like I think
right.
all in all, you did a really good job of that as well.
right.
So if we think in terms of a reflection, right?
Okay,
And we think if we go through the standards, right?
Right.
And because this again is your summative ones, this is your final one where you're thinking of all the standards,
Right.
correct?
right.
So the learner development, right?
Yes.
So we think about standard one, learner development.
All right. Well, we've got a lot of
Uh,
standards to go through
I
here. So
know.
let's take a look. I think this
Did
is
we
most
build on
certainly
their understanding.
developmentally appropriate, I think, for the age and for the ability of the students to be able to do this.
Mhm.
So this one, as well as I think the other ones and
Mhm.
standard ones, I would rate highly.
Mhm.
Learning differences, I think that, yeah, again, in my classroom, I think there is a lot of respect, I think, with this age group, understanding what's going on and what has to be going on, I think is good. I think with some of the differentiation, like I said, this one might be more on the proficient side. But yeah, I'll let you
Sure.
actually mark those for me, how you felt. Learning environment, yes, I think that is one that I've come a long way in. It is it's the greeting the students, it's knowing them, it's the setup of the classroom, it's positioning them at certain tables, it's strategic partnerships that's happening during the class, that I think that you saw that I was
Mhm.
definitely
Yeah.
hitting the mark on that.
Yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of growth in that area, and I think it's more as well, the expectations that you're setting for your students,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And then your quick reaction if they're not hitting those expectations, which I think is really creating a positive, like having a positive impact
Mhm.
as well.
Yeah. Okay, so standard 4 being the content knowledge. Again, I'd rate that highly. I think that my growth really in this program overall has actually been less about the content knowledge of what I'm teaching, and it's been more of how I'm delivering it and how I'm managing it. And what I'm working on is not actually super techie hard stuff, at least for me, but it's more like making sure the students understand it. It is doing, all the different bits and pieces to keep everything moving and to make sure we're meeting all the learners
Mhm.
at where they are in order to make sure they succeed. So I think I'd be happy with that one.
Mhm.
Application of content.
That's sort of the same thing. How are you
Right,
delivering it, right?
right, exactly.
And then your assessment
Exactly.
techniques.
So my assessment techniques overall in the program, I think I'm using a lot more of them. And a lot more varied and in the past, sometimes it was easy to just kind of work your way all the way until the bell and be like, oh, okay, bye everybody. And realizing that, having those pre-assessments at the beginning to make sure you know where they are. Having that constant check-in during the class, which I was doing, but now I'm more aware of.
Mhm.
Having those sometimes paper-based or sometimes electronic-based more formal summatives to see what they've got going on, or even just the quick little exit tickets.
Mhm.
I think that
Gives you a good
that it's
indicator
been
for students know and are able to
it
do.
is. So I'm happy with that, and of course, and I mentioned to Chanun before that all of these tricks in your pocket. It's exhausting to try and do all of them every single lesson.
Of course.
But to know, all the different things that you can do and how well they work and what works best with what age level and what class and how to, extract that knowledge to make sure that, that what they know
Mhm.
is really, and there's some trial and error in there too.
Mhm.
I've definitely had some experiences where it's like, oh, this didn't meet the mark at all as to where I thought the students would or could be.
For
And
sure.
that's there's kind of reshapes, then it's that quick on the fly, like, okay, well, we have to go back and we have to make sure we focus a little bit on
Mhm.
this first before we move on to make sure everyone knows about this particular, like math concept before we get into
Mhm.
the programming of
Mhm.
this that they might fall on. So
Mhm.
yeah,
But that's just good teaching, right? That's
yeah,
good teaching practice. You have your toolkit of
yes,
strategies.
yeah,
You're teaching the lesson as best. It's not always going to go well, no matter
right,
how experienced you are, right?
right,
You may always need to recap, and that shows that you're really paying attention to that data and that formative assessment. That's really, and
yeah,
then using it to inform your future planning, which
yeah,
is key, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Wonderful.
The planning, I think that this has been something that I've kind of been forced purposely by this program that I'm in to put together, because gosh, putting these 6-page, which I printed out right here, this lesson plan together for looking at, all the different strategies, we're putting out the vocabulary, learning about the differences between big ideas and learning objectives and objectives and overall unit goals, and getting all that straight in my head after putting these together. I better know much more better
Yeah.
what I'm doing because I've done it enough times and in enough detail. And then of course the whole I do, we do, you do practice throughout the lesson,
Mhm.
figuring that out. And then kind of that last little recap, even if it's just like 60 or 90 seconds, to make sure at the end of class, like, okay, this is what we did,
Mhm.
review, how do we feel, boom, boom. And yeah, so I think that just the overall structure and flow of it, I think, is improved. Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah,
I agree, definitely.
yeah,
And then your instructional strategies, we kind of talked through this
yeah,
already,
we did.
right?
Yeah, we
In the
did.
way that you're
We
delivering
did.
the content, right, as
We
well.
did. We did.
And I
So
think like this, well, I thought it was really a cool idea to have, by the way, on this lesson, the Spheros using that, like in order to teach the concepts, right? I thought the Spheros were good. It really added that engagement piece, right? And so it made something that's like, otherwise, if you're just tapping like this,
yeah,
students might get
that's
a
less
little
interesting.
bored, right?
Yeah,
And you might have off task behavior, and
yeah,
then like engaging them, adding that next level of
yes,
Spheros, I thought was great. And they
yes,
really enjoyed it, and they were
yes,
really successful
yes.
because of it. And I think they understood. One thing though, that I might, one like sort of next step for the lesson that I was thinking was thinking about the overall question in terms of like, what does Morse code have to do with coding? Right? Like, what is the connection between the two? And then talking about whether or not, unpacking that question with them, saying like, why am I introducing you to this idea of Morse code, right? Which we used so many years ago and we could see it's like outdated. How is that the same, right? Or
Mhm.
different in terms of the coding that we do today
Mhm.
in the way that we communicate, right?
Mhm.
So it'd be interesting to see their response and if they can make the connection between the two,
Mhm.
right, as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
That was the only one thing that I thought, oh, that'd be
Yeah.
interesting to,
Okay.
as a next step, perhaps.
Well, perhaps I'll bring that up with them in a future
Mhm.
class, just as a
Mhm.
quick
See what they-
5-minute kind of recap of a past lesson to just kind of
Yeah.
think about those, those links.
Yeah, yeah, because we're always thinking about, it's so
Yeah.
important to always think with students about why are we learning this, right? How is it
Mhm.
connected to what we already know, right? And what
Mhm.
is the purpose of this? Where does it fit in, in the realm of what I already know, that inventory of your brain, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
as well.
Right.
Okay, so next one's professional learning and ethical practice.
So 9 and
Professional-
10 are standards that are not so easy to demonstrate in a classroom. So those were, for
Just
example,
based on your
professional learning was
reflection.
based on my reflection, based on some of the work that you have access to that I've done. And a professional learning plan that I recently put together about, the kind of my different sources of information, the groups I'm part of,
For
the
sure.
events that I participate in, the conferences that I try to attend, if they're physical or virtual things here in Dubai or online.
Great.
So I do have that. That's available for you to take a peek at. And then 10, which we actually just discussed a few minutes ago, which
The
was
leadership.
the leadership. And I think that something that myself and some other people in my cohort have mentioned is that it was a tough time of year to try and put something in place for Standard 10.
Mhm.
Because the hard thing about Standard 10 is that it involves work from other people sometimes, or
Mhm.
usually.
Mhm.
And maybe some feedback I might have for the program myself is like, okay, Standard 10, we know this is coming. We know that there's a mini project associated with it. Tell us at the beginning, or tell us,
Mhm.
early on in the program, because then, as more things come up during the year, more opportunities might come up. We might know, oh, okay, I could have put this Standards 10 together in a better way earlier in the year when there was
Mhm.
more opportunity, as opposed to kind of crunch something in at the very end of the year.
Yeah.
So I think that Standard 10 was not, with what I put together, was not my best work, simply because it wasn't as developed as it could have been in another
Sure.
opportunity.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's many opportunities that you've modeled leadership throughout our school and continue to model leadership throughout our school, and things that you've organized, right, as well. So,
Yeah.
but it's different for us because I've known you for 4 years, right? and we're
Right.
together.
So you're
I've
not
got-
just looking at
I
one
have the
little thing that I've
oversight.
done. Right.
Yeah, I
Right.
have the oversight of the
Right.
whole, you as a professional.
Right.
Awesome.
Good. Well,
All
thank you
right.
for your feedback very much.
No problem. Thank you for all your hard work and effort.
yeah,
It's been
it's
an
been-
absolute pleasure.
It has. Yeah. Thank you. Great mentor. Okay.
Great student.
Yeah. Okay. Bye, everyone.